Barbara's having trouble getting in. I want to start because I don't want to delay any longer, but if you would do that, that'd be wonderful. All right, well, welcome everyone, and thank you for being here to our fourth of 4 forums. It doesn't mean that this is the end of the forums. You know, we need input as we move forward in this for sure. I am Dr. Patrick Sullivan. I am the very proud superintendent here in Cohasset. I'm proud to be part of this community. It's a supportive community that has really come together in this too. We did put out a draft, as you all know, on July 24th of our reentry roadmap. It is a draft. Very much we were looking at making sure that we looked at 3 possible formats that we were asked to look at for reentry by the commissioner and his reentry group: a full in-person, a hybrid, and then a fully remote learning model. And as we did our pressure tests, and we really looked at, and I'll get into this a little bit more, but we determined that the in-person model, based on the social distancing restrictions, was not something that we could put together in a safe manner in Cohasset Public Schools. And we'll get into that a little bit further. So we really focused our efforts on the hybrid and on our fully remote model, which we understand that, you know, given conditions that may come our way, we may have to move towards. We will today, you know, I'm going to get into who's here with us in a second, of course, but our purpose for today is really to gather information, to gain input into the draft, and to use that information to create our next draft. And I'll talk about the timeline in just a second. So with us today, I have Dr. Leslie Scollins, who is our assistant superintendent. This is Dr. Scollins. Thank you for being here, Leslie. And I would be introducing Barbara Sawanka, who is our Director of Student Services. She's attempting to get in, having a little technical difficulties, but when she does come in, I will introduce you to her. She's a new face in Cohasset, but she's already done a fabulous job and hitting the ground running. And of course, we have Principal Farrell, Lisa Farrell, who does such a fabulous job with our Osgood school. And, you know, of course, the students at Osgood are near and dear to everyone. They're our youngest students. And with that comes an extra sensitivity to the care we need to take around them. Safety is the most important thing we do. I always say that, you know, even above providing a strong education, which of course is our role, we have to make sure that the environments are safe. And so everything we're talking about today, I want, oh, there is Barbara Sawanka. So this is Barbara Sawanka. She is our Director of Student Services. Welcome, Barbara. And I told them you had a little bit of technical difficulty, but I'm glad you soldiered through. So welcome. It's like I've said before, it's not the best way to introduce someone to folks on Zoom, but it's a pleasure to introduce Barbara to the group here. Okay, so to continue, I think what was I saying? I don't remember my train of thought here.
How great the Osgood is.
Yeah, I'm sure I was. I was talking about safety and the fact that, you know, we really do have to prepare for the safety, and the safety of our younger students is, of course, really paramount. A little bit about the timeline that we have here. This is our 4th of 4 forums. We then have our August 5th school committee meeting, where we will be presenting a slightly altered draft. We've already taken in some information from the other drafts. We'll present a slightly altered draft to the, or whatever we land on, to the school committee for a vote pending our bargaining obligations with the Cohasset Teachers Association. You know, there are bargaining obligations, and I should say, although the members of the association were all through our planning process and really added a voice, as did parents, students, particularly the upper level students, of course. That's not to be confused with our bargaining obligations, which are ongoing. August 10th, at this time, the commissioner has asked that all superintendents put in a finalized, or at least a more finalized version of where we are and where we're going. And instead of, you know, talking about the 3 formats, really locking into which format we're going to put forth in the fall, unless further conditions come at us that make us have to change that. And I think you all can appreciate the position we're in with that. It's not an easy one, but we need to be nimble and we need to be thorough with everything we do. And that's what we're striving to do. And hopefully you saw that throughout the draft. We will, on the 10th, it is our thought right now that we're going to be asking families to let us know if you will be opting for a full remote. And what I mean by that is, even if we are going to be advocating for a hybrid and putting the hybrid up as the model, you will have an opportunity to choose a full remote model. We hope to have a little more information on what that will be at that point, so you can make a calculated choice. And, we're really asking that for people who do make that choice, that they think strongly about, this is probably where my son or daughter is going to be for the duration. And I say that knowing that there might be a possibility, obviously, to adjust, but clearly to put your student in the best position to succeed, you want to try to hit that consistency. So we're going to ask that people, when they do choose that with that thought in mind. And again, we'll be asking that on the 10th at the latest, and we'll be asking for that information by the 17th. And that information will be important to us because it will help us set up our finalized full remote learning model, even if it's in the hybrid. What I mean by that is, obviously the hybrid has some in-person, some full remote, but there are students who can opt for, through the families, a full remote option. We're in the process of implementing all the needed changes, and we will accelerate our work on August 17th, and we know fully what we're doing. Bus routes for students K through 6 outside of a 2-mile radius. Hopefully, if you are in that category, you've had a chance to answer the survey. We really need that information. If you haven't done that yet, you should contact probably Principal Farrell to let her know, and she'll get that information to me. You can also contact me, of course. But that's important because we are creating our bus routes, and we're working with some great people in the community to do that. They're incredible, and they're helping us because this is what they do for a living, with GPS coordinates. And we will have that out to you as soon as we can, but we're hoping no later than August 17th. If it's a bit later, it's only later because we need to look at who's going to be doing fully remote and to adjust our routes accordingly. We realize that it's a stringent rule around buses and bus usage, but remember, the rule for us is that we can only fit 1 student per seat. We can definitely put members of the same family in 1 seat, and we're following the law here. I know that in my household, all of my kids in 1 seat, or 3 of the 4 of them anyway. It wouldn't be too popular, but it is something that we're going to have families do because it's the safest way to get as many kids on the bus as we can safely. New information has come out since our July 24th draft, mainly the full remote learning guidance, which you will see incorporated into the August 10th draft, and also guidance for courses requiring further safety considerations. And this includes courses such as phys ed, band, chorus, theater, if you're in the older ages, older grades, that really, because of their nature, requires some additional safety considerations. So that will all be seen in the roadmap. And then there was a memorandum of understanding between the Massachusetts Teachers Association at large in Massachusetts and the commissioner. And that memorandum of understanding or agreement really dictated that teachers be given 10 days before the start of school in order to have training on protocols, professional development considerations, which are many at this point, and to really get the environment ready, and from a social emotional standpoint, as well as a learning standpoint, for your children. I firmly believe that's a great idea. I think we all do as a leadership team. That will have an impact on our calendar and on the start date. The calendar is one of the areas that school committee decides. So that will be put up for a vote on the 5th, and that will be considered and voted on where we are pending our bargaining negotiations. So as I said, we are currently in negotiations with the CTA. And although, like I said, we had input from many stakeholders, as we have a unionized workforce, we do need to work with the CTA to bargain how any plan we create impacts their negotiated responsibilities and, of course, their working conditions. Those talks are certainly ongoing. Now, with those preliminaries aside, format of the forums, what we're going to do today is get into our Prezi, which you can find in the draft. It's right at the beginning in the executive summary. We're going to walk through some of the considerations for you so that we have a foundation to talk about. Principal Farrell is going to jump in and talk about the building formation. And then we'll do questions and answers. And the way I ask you to do this is we're not today really monitoring Facebook. So if you do want to ask a question, you need to be on this Zoom forum. I will say we have 124 participants right now on Zoom. That's great. We opened it up so we can have up to 3,000 participants on these forums now. We learned our lesson well from our first forum. And we do have people watching on Facebook. These are recorded, I should mention that, and you can play them live back on Facebook at any point in case you have questions about anything. And like I said, we're not gonna, if I didn't say it, I will. We're not gonna exhaust the questions today, we know that, but it brings us towards a better place and a more finalized place along the road to making sure you have the best possible situation centered for your students, and we have the best plan in place. So what I'd ask is that if you have a question as we go, please write it in the Q&A. I will go and I'm very transparent. I'll read the question. If it's a repetition, I'll just say there's a repetition here. And I'll attempt, working with Principal Farrell and Dr. Scollins and Barbara Swanka, we'll try to answer them to the best of our ability, knowing that sometimes a question comes along and we're not exactly sure what you're asking. So if that happens, or if you don't get your question answered, please email me directly, or if it's a specific building question, you can email Principal Farrell. And of course, you know our roles, and you can email any of the panelists here as you need to. So to begin what we're doing now, I just want to get into this Prezi. This Prezi was nicely created by our middle school principal working with me. He's very tech savvy, and this is, I think, a pretty user-friendly format. So I'll just kind of walk through it with you. So again, I mentioned our rationale for really advocating at this point for a hybrid and why we're doing that as opposed to a fully remote or an in-person model. First of all, after completing our pressure tests, and our pressure tests involved putting desks at 3 feet and 6 feet apart, looking at really the whole learning environment from a 3 foot and 6 foot distance protocol, we found that we just could not safely fit all of our students in our buildings with these social restrictions. It just wasn't a safe situation, we felt, for our students or our staff. Busing was another major factor that inhibits the return of all students in person at this time. Although we definitely increased our bus fleet. As you know, we have new start times coming up this fall. And to do that, we had increased our bus fleet. We're really unable to transport all of our students. Even if we were looking at K to 6, we would have to double. And if we were to advocate for more, it would be many, many more buses. Really not a feasible situation for us in terms of that. And as I said, you know, in terms of the all remote model, we feel that and we're being given information. Obviously, our rates are low in Cohasset right now. They're lower and at an acceptable level, according to the American Pediatric Association and the information we're getting from the state, to welcome students back in a format that we can do safely. And we're mindful of this, and we're going to be ever vigilant of it. But right now, we feel we can bring students back in a hybrid model. As I mentioned, we have 2 hybrid models. We'll talk specifically about the elementary hybrid model today, but that model involves 2, if you call them cohorts or groups, one going Monday and Tuesday in person, and then the other going Thursday and Friday in person. The idea is that it's 2 days in person and 3 days remote learning. That middle day, which would be a Wednesday, will be remote learning for everyone. And that will involve, on top of a deep cleaning, and we are going to do a lot of cleaning protocols that I can talk about today if people want to get into it more, touch point and deep cleaning, but that'll give us a day to do that. And there's a set model for that in terms of a remote learning day. And I know Principal Farrell will get more into that. But the whole point is to balance synchronous learning, in-person learning, with asynchronous learning, and to make sure that we didn't have a full week that a student of this age would go without seeing their teacher. We knew this to begin with, but we certainly saw it in the spring that one-on-one connection is really important. And clearly, as we're building basic skills, particularly at Osgood, the more we can have of that, the better. And so this is the safest model that we're advocating for that allows all those things to come together. And then just so everyone knows, at our secondary level, if you haven't seen our prior forums, we're looking at a 1 week on where we're in person and then a 1 week remote. And we feel that the independent nature of the older student allows for us to look at the whole learning model in one big remote kind of development situation, where we're just going to have times when we're in person and times when we're able to view it in remote. And a lot of it will be more synchronous at that level because of the nature of the secondary student, and it will also be more exploration driven because of that as well, because of the basic skill development. So some basic protocols that all the plans are going to have, and of course there's many protocols as you saw from the draft, but masks. Now the rule is grade 2 through 12 are required to wear masks. And I want to be clear about that. This is not a suggestion, it's an absolute requirement. So that's a must, and a staff of course need to wear masks at all times with students. And then unless of course we have mask breaks, there will be frequent mask breaks, both prescribed and also when needed. And we'll get into that a little more. The question is about students pre-K, K and 1. And right now the guidance does not say that that's a requirement. I should say that masks and policy on masks are really the purview of the school committee. But right now we're looking at following the guidance from my point of view of grades 2 through grade 12 wearing masks. And I realize that that does provide some dilemmas in a school where you are PK to 2. And we'll talk a little more about that and some of the things we hope to do to try to make that a situation that works for everyone. All cleaning protocols will be, and then of course that all of that is mindful that the school committee has the ability to change a mask policy, but the mask policy can't go against what is a requirement, and the requirement is grades 2 through 12. All cleaning protocols will be sanctioned by are sanctioned by the CDC, and they'll be followed as the Centers for Disease Control. And I mentioned touch point cleaning and deep cleaning. And I talked about this, that we're going to be asking families to inform their principals. Well, I'm actually going to be, if you know you're not going to be returning and you know you might be doing a homeschooling situation, do please tell your principal that as soon as you can. And of course, we'll have information asking about fully remote coming up shortly. So I'm going to let Principal Farrell jump in now and talk a little bit specifically about the model of learning at Osgood. So Principal Farrell.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. One of the things I want to say again to everyone is thank you for letting us in your home or wherever you happen to be watching this evening. So thank you. There, as Dr. Sullivan was saying, we're splitting or dividing the classrooms into cohort A or cohort B. I think it's important at this time to let families know that when we're moving students from cohort A in a class to cohort B and designing the classrooms, it's multifaceted as far as looking at the number of students in the classroom, who has a sibling either at Osgood or at Deer Hill, and trying to keep siblings together. So it's not as easy as just looking at the class list and saying, okay, the first 10 students will go in cohort A, the last 10 will go in cohort B. I know a lot of parents are trying to figure out which cohort your student will be in, but it is a little bit more difficult than that, because not only do we look at siblings and putting siblings together, but there's also the male-female ratio. We'd like to have the students have a few friends in the cohort that they're going to be in. And also that looking at the enrollment. I was saying to Dr. Sullivan and Dr. Scollins that our enrollment changes daily. Pretty unbelievable. We're having students moving in to the district, which is fabulous, buying homes. And so I'd say within the last 3.5 weeks, we've had 20 students move in. So if you're looking at 20 students moving in, and then there are some families that are choosing other educational platforms, other schools, or they're moving. So it fluctuates. So even though you think you may know exactly what your class look like, because we're moving one class to another teacher, the numbers do change quite a bit from group A and group B. And unfortunately, we'll have to see how it plays out when we get to that October deadline. I mean, sorry, yeah. The August deadline.
I know, and Principal Farrell, to add to that, you mentioned boy, girl, but gender, but obviously we're also looking at equity in every way in our groupings. And we also have to consider transportation. You know, you have to consider the students who will be in each grouping and how that might affect our busing. We don't think that's going to be a giant factor, but it's very restrictive in terms of if we're trying to set those up in terms of how we can offer kind of, you know, catered situation to, it's the wrong word to use, but a situation where a family can dictate a particular cohort or not a cohort. We're so restricted with all of this that we really have to think about space in the classroom, sibling pairings, and all the factors that Principal Farrell mentioned. So apologize, Principal Farrell. I just want to.
No, thank you. The clarification helps tremendously. I should have begun by saying the social emotional piece is what, as you all know, drives the Osgood. It is the first time many of our students are in school, kindergarten, preschool. So I want you to know that our pledge is to make sure that we keep that social emotional, upbeat, wonderful place that we have at the Osgood going. It may look a little different, and I'm sure it will look a little different to a lot of people, but the upbeat, positive attitude that comes from the staff is something that we always look forward to. So with that being said, Group A and Group B will be a little bit different. Please don't try and figure out what your child will be in, because I don't want you to be disappointed.
Yeah, and I feel like we're pretty close to having that developed, and when it's the appropriate time, certainly soon, we'll be able to get that out to folks.
The in-person hybrid model, excuse me, as I had mentioned before, the social emotional learning, for any of you that are coming into the Osgood, new as kindergarten parents, I welcome you. I'm sorry, this is the way that you're entering into the Osgood. It'll be something you talk about years from now, but please know that we are dedicated. I have the most amazing dedicated staff that I could ever come across in my many, many, many years of education. They're absolutely fantastic, the way they care. The building itself, I have to tell you, if you haven't been in the building, is absolutely beautiful. So the physical environment is fantastic. The emotional environment is fantastic. And we're trying to keep that going, and we will keep that going. We are probably known for our music. The louder, the better at the Osgood. We will keep all of that going while working with students so that they can understand why certain things are happening, why you have to wear a mask, why you have to stay so many feet apart from a friend. That's our challenge at the early elementary, whereas the middle school, high school challenge is completely different. Ours is just learning how to function with a group of people for our students right now, being socially distant. The ELA and the math that we'll be doing all in person, social studies and science and the specials, the staff that we are working with and that I've had the pleasure to work with will be developing lessons that will be taught as if it were a regular day, as if we were just going along. It's just a little different because we will have masks on, depending on the grade level. The teachers will all have masks on, and maybe our breakup of the day is a little different. We'll be having mask breaks. We'll be definitely trying to go outside as much as possible. We have that beautiful outdoor classroom that was built, and we'll be using as many of those spots to talk about social emotional learning, to do the ELA, math, science, and social studies. And I know that, thank you, Mrs. Saranka, for being here. The special ed services will be delivered to the letter of their IEPs. And for tier 2 interventions, reading and math specialists, they are ready and eager to be working with children in the building and doing some remote activities as well. The remote learning hybrid piece of the model is grade level. Okay, so the best way for me to describe this is if you could just imagine you're in first grade and it's Wednesday, excuse me, in your home. We had from March until June, we had what we called our pandemic remote learning, which we were learning right in the middle of the pandemic. How are we going to do this? How is the teacher doing it? For any of you that saw some of my morning messages, Maggie and I got a little bit better as we went through the month of March and April. May, not so bad. In June, I was ready for America's finest.
Maggie's the dog, just people know.
Maggie is the dog, yes. But it definitely in the spring, that pandemic learning was hard for everybody, not just the students and the parents. It was also hard for the teachers because that's not necessarily the way we were trained or what we look forward to doing for teaching. So with the PD that's going to be going on this summer and the PD that Dr. Scollins will be offering the staff, we're going to be looking at morning messages being, the remote learning with the morning messages being from the teacher, getting the child's day started, content area assignments, mini lessons that might be pre-recorded, adaptive programs. We are very fortunate that we will have Lexia again this year for reading, Dreambox for math that will provide some math experiences. And we also, with the support of the tech department and Dr. Scollins, we'll be doing Google Classroom for K1 and 2, which we've never had K1 and 2 for Google Classroom. That's usually something that we've had for end of second grade going into third grade, but I think it's really important, as does everyone else, to bring that Google Classroom down to the lower grades. And again, all of that online PD will be offered to the teachers. Offline independent packets, I go back to March 13th, maybe March 16th. I got a lot of parents that wanted packets, paper packets, so that their child could work on this at home. And I'm a huge proponent of paper and pencil instruction, because that, for some people, that's a comfort level. So we will be having packets available that will go along with the instruction that happened on either Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday. And again, looking at mini lessons being offered, we had a superstar within our ranks, and Liz Deininger did a fantastic job doing a ton of mini lessons for reading. She will continue that this year. Looking at the special ed services, again, the remote and the in-person, as we've said, we'll try and get the students, we will have the students doing what they need to do so that their IEP is followed. And tier 2 interventions, looking at what we were able to succeed with our students in March, April, May, and June. Where did we end up with them? Where do we need to pick them up? Because it's really important that we meet the student where they are when they come into school. So the remote learning Wednesdays, we'll have, they will attend morning meetings, which will be held by their teacher. They'll have content area assignments. They'll have reading, math that they need to complete. Office hours will be held by the classroom teachers, so that if a student and or a parent is having a difficult time right in the middle of that Wednesday remote learning, they'll know that the teacher's available at a specific time to just pop in and ask a question. Hi, I don't understand this. What do you think? Could you tell me a little bit more about that? The teacher responsibilities are going to be having facilitating the morning meetings and the closing meetings. So in the morning, we start at 9:05, 9:10. When we start, there'll be a morning meeting remotely. The children will go on with a plan, schedule that they have for the day. And then we'll close the day just as we would if they were in the building, talking about what they learned, maybe what they need to do for the next day. And of course, when we're not in school on that Wednesday, when the students aren't there on that Wednesday, it allows us Tuesday night to have a deep clean. It allows us Wednesday to have the cleaning while the teachers are there, but a more intense clean than if the children are there. And then again, it allows Wednesday night to be another deep clean, so when that next group comes in, we can guarantee, it's almost like getting a house ready for guests. We can guarantee that they're going to be in a clean spot. This in-person learning sample is exactly that. It's just a sample. It could change. The students arriving at 9:05 to 9:45 in person, they will have independent reading, their morning work, their morning meeting. From 9:45 to 10:45 will be ELA, which will be your writing, your reading, your phonics, your Wilson phonics. 10:45 to 11:05 would probably be, and I say probably because you've got to remember, we have to take the lead of the students. If they need a mask break sooner, then that's when we'll do that. 10:45 to 11:05 will be snacks, schedule mask break. 11:05 to 12:15 will be ELA, social studies, science integrated in. So if we're talking about habitats in science, and then maybe we read a lot of story on what a raccoon's habitat is, kind of pulling it all together in the early grade levels, that's what we do. 12:15 to 1 o'clock will be some sort of recess lunch. I will let you know, because I think it's really important for our younger students, recess and lunch is going to look different as far as you're only going to have half your first grade students there on a particular day, but of that half of those students will go to lunch, the other half will go to recess, and then we'll switch, because again, the requirements state that we can't have that many students in one area, so we're trying to work with that. The reason I mentioned that, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, just say, I think one thing that you said is that this is really a sample.
Mhm.
It's kind of giving them a sense of the full day and what it might look like. But yes,
I
that's
think that's important for families to know that, you know, recess and lunch are very important to all students. For the
absolutely.
younger students, it's very important. We are going to work with lunch where we have it. Maybe we could have it outside if it's a nice day. Recess, a group will have the playground, the other group may not for a day, but we'll work with that. And another schedule, we'll come in, have math, schedule a math break again. A special, one of our 5 specialists will be happening in school. Read aloud, the end of the day, closing, packing up, and staggered dismissal, because again, we can't all just exit the building at the same time. So that'll be a plan that we have to really focus on. Remote learning, we want to stick to the same type of schedule. It's important for students to have, all students to have a schedule. It's really important for younger students to have a ritual or a schedule that's set. So from 9:05 to 9:25, they'd have their reading work. 9:25 will be remote morning meeting through a Zoom. We will be doing morning meetings through Zoom with available staff members that want to say good morning to specific groups. For example, Mr. Vinton might be in Mrs. Eula's group on a certain Wednesday, on a certain Thursday, and maybe he's doing morning announcements. So we're going to change it up. So on the remote days, they're getting morning announcements by someone for their whole class that is associated with school, and really could add another lesson to that. The ELA mini lessons, again, a mini lesson, something that they learned on Monday or Tuesday, working with it more on Wednesday at home, doing some reading aloud, a lot of reading at home, having a snack period from 10:15 to 10:35. Again, they're at home, so if that fits in at that time. 10:35 to 11:20, there'd be a remote learning special going on. It could be music, it could be PE, it might be library. 11:20 to 12:20, we would have the adaptive ELA practice and offline assignments. For example, Lexia, maybe an assignment that the teacher gives and they watch the video from Mrs. Deininger, and or they have an assignment from the math specialist. And then also looking at Dreambox and Google Classroom. Play and lunch. And then we go back to the end of the day. We have a math mini lesson that we put forward, online assignments, a break at home, and then complete assignments. And again, on a Wednesday, they would have a closing ceremony. Well, not camp, but a closing with the classroom teacher or whoever is assigned to that group.
So Lisa, I'm going to move a little bit. I think, you know, because I know they have a lot of questions and I want to get to them. But I think you get a sense for how it's all coming together here. That, you know, in the it's in the plan, and I think people can review that. The full remote plan, you want to talk a little bit about that, Lisa?
Certainly. With the full remote plan, again, we're going to stay with our group A and our group B for full remote plan. The reason we're going to stick with 2 groups as opposed to 1 is because if you remember back in the springtime, it is very difficult to have 20 students on a Zoom and working with the teacher. Even though the teachers had Zoom buddies and other adults that was in the Zoom with them, smaller groups time and size that the teacher is working on remote instruction with the students. And the specialist schedules remain unchanged. Morning meetings will be there. We're including 15 to 20 minutes at the end of the day. Classroom teacher instruction will shift from live to recorded depending on what works best for that lesson and for that class. And classroom teachers will hold 2 30-minute office hours per week. Again, we want to stay as close as we can to, if the child's in school, their at-home schedule will be the same. Continuity will be really important.
Okay. So yeah, and it should be noted that this is really the full remote in the hybrid. So in other words, a little different than if somebody's doing only remote, which is a different scenario. So just moving, thank you, Lisa, that's great. So just moving quickly to give someone, I'm not going to go over these, but you know that there are many safety protocols that are articulated. I'd be glad to talk about any of these as we get into it, but there are many. In the first 6 weeks, although I mentioned the start date may change a bit from what's now September 8th because of that MOU, the goals won't change. So, you know, clearly the goals are to establish safety and security, to reestablish it, because we have to think about our current model and then what they'll be coming into, to allow students to reconnect with each other obviously their former teachers and their current teachers, to understand the type of learning we're delivering. And, although it's not as, major at this level, to get some understanding for what's happening around them as it's appropriate. But clearly to focus on all of the social emotional learning competencies. And this is self-awareness and self-reflection, more apparent at our older years, but still apparent here. Staff professional development, just so everyone knows, these are 3 areas that we're really focused on. Cultural competency for our staff at the elementary level, obviously promoting kindness, promoting inclusivity, but also looking at what we use for texts. All of that is very important, and making sure that we engage in inclusive and appropriate discourse with our students as we're introducing them to materials. And then finally, as Lisa said, and she does such a great job with this, and I have to kudos to that team. Cohasset schools are joyous places, and there isn't a more joyous school than the Osgood school, I would say anywhere. And really keeping the joy is something that is really major for us. It's going to be a major theme of the year, that we need kids to have fun at school, to feel safe at school, to get to know their teacher. And we're going to take time to do that. We realize that's going to include a lot of letting you know what's happening in our schools. And we're going to take measures to make sure you're comfortable as families before you come into the school here. I have a student going to kindergarten myself. I have 4 students who are in elementary grades in a nearby district, and all of those things that I want for my kids, we're going to make sure we do here. And you don't have a better leader in that than Principal Farrell to make sure you're provided that. And then CASTLE, which is the Collaborative of Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, has a reentry plan and guidance that they put forward. I'm not going to read the points, you can see them right there, but they're really going to guide us as we help our students, families, and staff. And that will become our long-range SEL planning, and we're dedicated to providing family resources and staff resources. So that's a bit of an overview for us. Thank you, Principal Farrell. It was excellent.
Thank you.
We'll go through now some of the questions, and we'll try to answer as many as we can. And I might even promise you a speed round as we get towards the end to see what we can do. So this first one says, first of all, thank you for all the efforts on this. Boston News reported that the Massachusetts Teachers Union is advocating for full remote. Has this come up so far in negotiations? And if so, are more plans being made for this model? So it is not. They have not. I do not know right now what our Cohasset Teachers Association, what their position is on some of the things. We're still in the process of negotiations. We're going to advocate for what's best for our kids, what's safe for our kids, what's safe for our staff. And we will, as I said, our bargaining obligations are set for us, and we'll continue to move forward with that. We're very focused on doing what's appropriate and what's right. We're looking at all data. We're also looking at the data around students who haven't been in school since March 13th, and the trauma that they've experienced, and the dysregulation that they're experiencing, and the lack of learning that they're experiencing. And we're trying to advocate for that as best we can, keeping all of the measures on the virus expansion in mind. So it's a great question, and something that, these discussions are so important. Will teachers be required to conduct remote learning from the school and not their home? That's still in negotiations. So that's something that wouldn't be fair for me to talk about. You should just know as a family member, as a parent or guardian, that your student is going to get a full remote learning experience that really is, as I think Lisa mentioned, when we were in the spring, we called it pandemic learning. It was a term coined by actually Peter DeWitt, who's an instructional leader. I thought it was fabulous because it really captured the mode we were in, because we didn't know how long it was going to be. There were so many considerations. Families were in all kinds of different places. We were in different places as a school and trying to get our head around it. And it was very, very difficult to create what was asked of us, which was remote learning. Not as much now. We've had time to plan, we've had time to get our head around it, and you will see a different and more robust model. And that's very important for you to understand. Why are teachers not required to come in before school begins to adapt current curriculum for full remote in the event that occurs? They are. So teachers are. We do have professional development days in the beginning, and as I mentioned, maybe this question was asked before I got to that, but the MOU does see that as an important consideration, and rather than a requirement, I think it's a necessity. So I would definitely partner with teachers in feeling that they need that time for preparation, and we're going to be afford that for them. To say, why is there not greater consideration for children who will suffer under a full remote paradigm? I don't know if I agree with that. I think there are considerations for making our full remote paradigm whole, but as I said, right now, we're advocating for getting the students in as much as we possibly can in a safe way, because we recognize the importance of that from so many levels. So I hope that helps give you a little more confidence in what we're advocating for and what we're pushing for in the district. Will specialists be required to hold Zooms with groups of children whom require additional support? Now, this is one of those questions about specialists. If you're meaning, we sometimes term specialists as our physical education teachers, our music teachers. So I don't know if that's an appropriate answer for this, because you can see in the model, we have our specialists kind of working hand in hand with our core teachers. I mean, they're all important teachers. We pledge the importance of teaching the whole child and the importance of all of those things in developing the whole kid. But I'm going to let actually Barbara answer this a little bit, because I think it might be asking about students who need more support through an individual education program. So Barbara, I'll let you answer that in thinking that might be the question.
It may be, and thank you all for having me here. It's wonderful to kind of virtually meet all of you, as good as that is, right? So certainly, just like we were talking about pandemic learning before, that's kind of really what went on in special education as well as in general education during the spring. It was a lot of resources and supports. This fall, what we are looking at is we are really looking at giving the full complement of the service delivery page of the IEP, all of the services that the child should be receiving, they will be receiving in some model, whether it is live and in person, synchronous or asynchronous, remote, including, but obviously not limited to, all of their specialists and therapies. So all of those things will be being delivered to your children. The model and the form in which they will be delivered, will be different and picked, and a model that if it needs to be tweaked in order to really help the child, it certainly will be tweaked as we go along. But I do want you to know that all of the plans are going to be service and learning plans and very robust in the fall.
Thank you, Barbara. Well said. Will the kids be expected to complete homework? Lisa, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. At the Osgood, because of the age of the students and the importance of at-home time to do practice of assignments, for example, reading at home, read to somebody, math, do your math facts at home, play math games. To say that it's homework, there won't be homework for that they'll be doing, but it might be a reiteration of something they did during the day, or practice a game, or do something to that availability. Because whether they're in school on the Monday, Tuesday, or they're home learning or vice versa, they'll be doing quite a bit of their learning, and they do need to just be themselves and play afterwards, whatever that looks like. So practice will happen at home, but it's not necessarily homework.
Great, thank you, Lisa. When do you anticipate announcing the groupings for AB? So I mentioned that part about transportation and the role that has in some of these groupings, and so we may be able to announce them fairly soon, like I would say, within the next week or so, but it would be pending, and this is, I have to talk to the leadership team a little bit more, and it would be pending some of these situations that can come up. One of them is transportation, because we have to remember that no matter what day you're on, we can only put 23 or maybe a few more on the bus if we're able to, it's 26, but we're able to put some family members together. But we have to consider that. Clearly, if there's one day that is overloaded, that's a problem. We have to be flexible and mindful of it. But we may be able to release them pending some specific considerations fairly soon. I hesitate to give an exact date, but I would say within the next weeks or so, a week. Will any of the remote learning while other students are in the, will any of the remote learning while other students are in the classrooms include live Zoom teaching? or are we totally on our own for 2 out of the 5 days? So first of all, let's start with the back end of that. I know where that's coming from because, as a parent of 4 kids my wife and I obviously work full-time. I work full-time for sure, but we're juggling it just like everybody else is. And we do have young kids, and I recognize that it's difficult for that. We're looking at some ways to help you. We do have a grant that is a substantial grant. It's about $225 per student in Cohasset. It comes out to about $328,000, and we do have some other funding sources, but we're looking at the potential for potentially getting some remote learning tutors or something to that effect that can help with this type of, you say, will you be on your own? Will help with some of the learning that's occurring. And although they may not be instructing, they might be supporting. That's a thought, and we have some other thoughts around that too, but we are conscious of the need for that. And Lisa, and maybe even Leslie, do you want to talk about anything regarding the synchronous versus asynchronous and what we would be providing? You should have seen that in the model, that there are some times when there's synchronous offerings happening. But go ahead, Lisa, and then Leslie, maybe you can chime in if there's something you want to support her with.
Yes, because the schedule will be more scripted than it definitely was in the spring. We'll have times when, if you followed the schedule before, during math time, this is what the students will be asked to do, to go on to a specific site, or maybe the teacher will be in contact with them. But again, remembering that the teacher, if your child's in school one day, the teacher is working with that student, and at home, the students that are working from home will be working on assignments or Zooms or whatnot with someone other than the teacher. It might be, as I said, with Mrs. Deininger, with a small group, but just trying to get all the pieces together so that when the students are at home, they're following a pretty tight schedule.
Mm-hmm. And we realize this is a part of our plan that we'll have to articulate more, and we know that, and you should expect that in the coming weeks. This is a similar question to that one. It just kind of extends it out and talks about, having multiple and proactive check-in opportunities, constructive feedback. It talks about specialists and what their role might be, and how Loom videos supplement, not replace. We're all on that. We get it. And I know that the high school plan seems to address some of these concerns more. We recognize that. We do have more touch points for our during a week than our high school folks do. So we articulated the remote format for more fully in our planning, but I think that ties into what we just answered. If you choose to go remote only, can you clarify if it's a full year opt-in or just the fall semester? So look at it from, we're not sure yet. We do believe that we want people to dedicate themselves to choosing a full year model, because no matter what it is, if you're in a full remote situation, to go back into a classroom is difficult because you're not necessarily in tune with what that class is teaching. And we need to look at the format that we may be advocating for in terms of our full remote as well. So although it won't be an absolute sentence that you have to stay in it, we are looking at, for continuity of learning, that when people do opt in for a remote only, that they're looking at it as potentially being the full year. I think that's an important thing to think about, because we do know that there will be struggles in getting folks back into the other model, and it might not be as seamless as folks think it will be. I had a question on the wording on page 63 to 64 of the document. Okay, all right, I'm not gonna be able to, maybe someone wants to get me this. I'm not gonna look at, but it's just so specific regarding the summer learning program. Are all students in the school invited? Oh, okay. Doctor, this is a good, I'm sorry, the 63, 64 page question got me, but Dr. Scollins, can you talk about the summer learning program and answer that question? Are all students in the school invited to our summer learning program? And obviously, Barbara and Lisa, you can chime in.
Right. So we received a grant. I don't have feedback. So we received a grant. Barbara Swank and I wrote a grant to look at what we could do.
Oh, she froze. Dr. Scollins froze. Barbara, you want to pick up at all?
Sure. So we wrote a grant to see what we could do about having a little bit of a jumpstart program during the summer. It's just for, a couple of weeks, a couple of hours a day. And, you know, we received a set amount of money. We're kind of working within the framework of that grant to see, you know, can we hire a couple of teachers and a couple of ESPs and, you know, open that up for some students who really do kind of require that kind of jump start in the summer before they come into the school year. And right now it's in process in terms of trying to acquire that staff for that, take a look at what we're going to be offering. It really is going to be kind of reading and social emotional learning. You know, obviously it sounds like it's going to be wonderful for absolutely everyone. We do have to limit it, you know, given our health and safety requirements to a certain number of students. But, you know, we'll make all of that very transparent to you as soon as we are able to really kind of flesh out what we're able to do with this.
And it's exciting because it's a great opportunity to help rebuild any of the learning loss that happened. And I get it with the skills that build upon each other in the elementary level. It's a concern for all of us. That's why one of the main reasons we want to make sure we can get the kids back if we can safely do that. Very important to all of us. Next is regarding the current grant and review for Chromebooks. Do we have an idea of timing and availability? Osgood and Deer Hill request system is longer taking submissions. Do we think there will be a nationwide demand for hardware? There is a nationwide demand for hardware. And right now, we're looking at, you know, we're certainly providing Chromebooks for need. They are going to be based on need, though, in many ways. And, you know, we're going to be looking at financial need and trying to attend to folks who really need that device because of that. We are a bring your own device district. You know, we have not prescribed one-to-one. So although we're going to try to fulfill as many as we can, we are eventually, because of funding scenarios, going to have to think about those people who absolutely need it for a financial reason, as opposed to the other need, which is real, but it's certainly something we're going to have to consider. The lack of structure last spring was problematic. Will we have specific assignments due each day rather than the open-ended learning menu? Yeah, clearly you're going to. You want to add anything to that? Like we said, it was a completely different scenario. We were trying to find a middle ground, and we've heard you loud and clear. But we're with you. This is a different day and age. It's a different time, and it will be a different structure. I don't know. You want to add anything to that, Lisa? I think you covered it.
Again, just as you said, it is going to be a different situation, and the learning menus will not be what's existing because there'll be a set schedule as to what the students will be doing. So it's not more of a menu where you pick and choose what you want to do. It'll be a set assignment that you're doing, or this is what you need to do to be ready for our next time that we're together in class.
There's a question about lunch policy. What is the rationale for the lunch policy? So it's really a practice right now, though. I'll read the whole question. Specifically, why we would send kids into the cafeteria. Wouldn't it be safer for them to stay in their classrooms to eat? So, and Lisa, you can jump in and help me with this, but our basic thought is the commissioner actually did, in many cases, recommend that eating be done in classrooms, but we don't feel that we'll have a problem creating a safe environment in our cafeterias. We feel we can separate them. We may have to change some furniture to do so. And we are concerned with allergies and not being able to attend to our students with allergies by having them eat in classrooms. And the change of scenery also makes a difference as well. We want our students to have that opportunity to move. I mean, my kids need to move all the time. I'm sure yours do as well. So moving them and incorporating their lunch opportunity. And believe me, we'll make lunch fun for the kids. I'll guarantee you that. They're going to feel really happy with what we do at lunch because it is a social time for them. And we do need to be mindful of the restrictions. But we've looked at that and we've made a decision that it's safer and it's going to be better for our kids to serve lunch in the cafeteria. Anything you want to add to that, Lisa?
No, I would just accentuate the part about the allergies, because if we have lunch in the classrooms, there could be somebody that has a specific allergy and they stay in their spot, but then they touch a pencil. It's the contaminants that go with any type of allergy. So it is definitely safer to have them in the open area away from any working materials that they're going to go back to.
Yeah.
And again, as you said, change of scenery is perfect.
Next question is, thank you. Do we know yet what percentage of kids that are choosing full-time remote? No, we clearly don't. And I get it. I get that's important. We have some factors that are making it difficult for us, but we're going to do the best we can, get the information out to you, and then we'll have an idea of where we are with that. But of course, what you're doing as a parent is what I'm doing as a parent. You're taking all this in and you're deciding if this is an appropriate format. We're going to make it safe, but is it an appropriate format for your child? And you have a right to opt for a full remote. What are the public health conditions that will inform the decision to move in either direction? That's an excellent question. Either a full reopening or to a full remote, other state guidelines or local decisions. So right now, there are not any set metrics for us. We're going by what the commissioner is telling us and what the governor is advocating for, and what we're looking at in terms of our local health agents and our local rates of infection. And I am hoping for sure that there are some set metrics that are launched for us and that are agreed upon, because that would give us as a community a really good idea of when we should and when we shouldn't. And it would take a little bit more of the subjectivity to that off of us. We're not health officials, we are educators. So we lean on health officials for all of these decisions, but there are not right now a set of metrics that allows us to have that. I really hope we'll get that coming forward. That's a really good question. How are you handling having teachers' aides in the classrooms where students have IEPs and require them? So remember now, not that this is absolutely for every individual education program, and I'm going to let Barbara answer this, but we do have PPE for any individual. PPE is personal protective equipment, of course. We call it school safety equipment, where if people are in proximity of a student, I always give the example of like a speech pathologist, and someone has to be very close to a kid for whatever reason. We do have gowns and masks and shields and other things to just add an extra mitigating level of safety. But I'll let Barbara answer that because I think it's a really good question.
Yes, so when we are devising the cohorts of students, we're working very closely with the principals to really make sure that the students who are on IEPs and the students who are in general education are, all kind of in those cohorts together so that we are getting the right number of kids in the classroom. Once you have the proper distancing, that's the important piece. If ESPs need to join a class for students and students are counted in that cohort, as long as they're maintaining the proper distancing, that is acceptable. So we're taking all of these things into consideration as we are developing these groups in these classrooms so that students can get what they need per their IEP.
Great, thank you, Barbara. Are you putting preschool kids on the same day as siblings in other schools? So our preschool is a bit different because we do have an afternoon and I should say a morning and an afternoon preschool. And those are, right now anyway, have created our cohorts for us. Is that fair to say, Principal Farrell?
Yes, actually, we're looking at the preschool, the cohorts, and we are looking to see where their siblings are. Because if we could do something to the effect of making it easier on family and having siblings going at the same time, I think that would be great. So we are looking at that, but it is, Barbara and I are meeting with our preschool teacher, just trying to figure out what these classes will look like. One of the biggest challenges in that situation is if you have 8 to 10 preschool students, you also have to remember we have ESPs in there. So now you're adding in adults in that situation. So we need to be very careful as to how many students we have with adults in the room also. So yes, we will definitely look at helping as much as we can to get siblings on the same schedule.
Will teachers be wearing masks or shields so the kids can still see their faces? They'll be wearing masks. Masks is what we're advocating for. That's the guidance. Shields are a mitigating factor. There may be some conditions that allow that, but they'll be wearing masks. And we're going to take a lot of time to make sure that's not a scary experience for the students. And that's something that I have so much faith in our staff because they're so good at that. And, it feels like a giant hug walking into Osgood, and it will continue to feel that way, but it'll be a social distance hug, I guess. But you're going to have that experience of knowing what your teacher looks like and doesn't. And they'll do this in a mindful way. We do have the ability to order some transparent masks. I'm not 100% convinced that won't be even a little scarier at sometimes, but we're gonna work that through. But we're very mindful of the need to break down that barrier and to make sure kids are comforted in that experience. Is that fair to say, Lisa?
Yes, it is. Definitely one of the things that we've been talking about is, maybe if the teachers get the opportunity, or maybe we're going to talk about as a staff, sending a picture to your child, to the students with their welcome back class letter, what the teacher looks like without a mask on, and then what she will look like with a mask on. It's a big difference. You don't see a smile through a mask.
And we'll have loads of opportunities to make sure that we have that experience. And we are going to take a lot of care in making the younger kids feel comfortable. That's a huge part of what we're going to do. Please clarify what Tier 2 is in regards to specialists. So I guess that would be, again, maybe a special education question. I can kind of take that a little bit. So in a response to intervention or a multi-tiered system, a Tier 2 is usually something that can happen in a classroom, or it can happen out of a classroom, but it's an intervention that helps students who might not be meeting with success, given a particular teaching model that helps everyone. So that can be done in many different ways. I don't know, do you want to elaborate any, Barbara or Lisa, on some of the things that a Tier 2 might look like from a specialist point of view?
Lisa, do you want to start with the reading and math specialist?
Okay, thank you. So Tier 2, the best way that I always think of Tier 2 is if you go for an ice cream and you get the 1 scoop of ice cream, everybody gets the 1 scoop. Tier 2 is some children need a second scoop of that ice cream, and the second scoop of the ice cream makes it a little easier for them to enjoy the rest of their dessert. So for Tier 2 would be the math and reading specialist would be meeting with the students in class and maybe remotely giving them ideas of what they need to be doing. Because remember, we did lose quite a bit of school time, not necessarily curriculum work, but we lost school time where we were getting to know who needs help in what area. So Tier 2 is you get what everybody else gets, but you get an additional scoop of it.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
That usually joins in those conversations and provides also, some ideas, some opportunities, sometimes some staffing support in that as well.
Can you speak to the rationale behind having only second graders wearing masks? So it's not really my rationale, it's the requirement that's been issued to Aspire State. So that is it. And I believe it's based on the data that says about students, the age of students being able to be transmit the disease and contract the disease. But more apparently, I think it has also some to do with that paired with the age of the student and their ability to successfully wear a mask in an environment. So I think that's what it's taking into account. And I want to make it clear that our school committee has the ability to make a decision that all students would wear masks because they do have the purview to do that based on the commissioner's guidance. But right now it's grade as set by the commissioner, grade 2 through grade 12. This is just something about morning message is not a priority. This person for remote learning, instead the focus should be literacy and math skills. Okay, we'll take that into consideration. We do believe that our morning messages are important because they unify the students and they also provide that social emotional moments in a responsive classroom model to set the day ahead of them. So we do hear that. A little shout out to Liz Dininger and her awesome Loom lessons. Yeah, they were great. They're a game changer for remote learning. Again, our staff's getting better, and we have some great staff, and Liz is one of them, so that's great to hear. When will we know the official schedule for live Zooms, morning closing instruction? It will help us plan childcare scheduling and private tutoring. Well, again, I hope we can help you a little bit with that private tutoring idea and maybe support you a little more so that you don't need that, but I do respect that. We're going to work that out. I would think that would, of course, come, unfortunately, just because of everything we need to do closer to the start of the year than we typically would have it. Any thoughts on that, Lisa?
I'm looking at having, as you said, within the next few weeks, the list going out, the AB list. Then the next would be schedules. And yeah, it would be very nice to have a schedule for teachers, for myself, and for parents to know, okay, this is what time the Zoom is going to start. Here we are. And it's nice for the students to, again, be in a ritual. So as soon as we possibly can get those Zooms and the schedules out there, we definitely will.
How will recess, work for students who are not required to wear masks. So recess is a time when we will designate as a mask break, correct, Lisa?
Yes.
And that will be outdoors, of course, only when it's outdoors. And it will be, of course, we're talking grade 2 here. The other students at this point will not be wearing the masks, but that's how they're cohorted anyway in recess. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
So the plan is when it is recess time, again, as I said, half the cohort will be inside for lunch. The other half will go out to recess. And the recess area will be broken up to the playground, and then there's a recess spot up back. So we're going to break the groups up as small as we possibly can so that when they're outside, they can run around, be separated, but still play with their friends and not have that mask on, because that will, it makes it a little tougher. But we definitely want to make sure that they are outside having fun, getting fresh air. It'll be the same for PE class. The more we can be outside, the better off we are.
Great. This is a great question. Is there another deep clean scheduled over the weekend before cohort A attends on Monday? I was looking at the plan. Yes, there is. Absolutely, there is.
Yes.
And I need to make sure I articulated that appropriately. So that's a really good point. Thank you for bringing that up. Yep, we're going to clean in between the cohorts, and we're going to deep clean again on the weekend. Thank you for all your hard work on this. Thank you for saying that. Who will make the final decision on whether or not students will start the year in person, or is this the plan until we hear otherwise? No, the final decision is the school committee's decision. They're going to decide on what model we go with and what model they're going to vote on the model and what's accepted. But they're not the only authority on who can make the decision. Of course, the governor can, through the commissioner or on his own, can make the decision to stop and make a decision across the board that a school or districts have to go to a certain place. And like I mentioned earlier, if there is a metric that comes out, that certainly would be a tool that would be helpful for all as well. Are there sanitation practices for recess lunch between the groups? Yes. So we're going to hand sanitize I think that's Dr. Scollins trying to come back here. Yes, she is. So this is a small 2 fluid ounce, which I nervously ripped the cover off as I was talking here. But we're going to ask that everybody brings this in. I should say that my kids already have these really interesting containers that go around them, very fashionable. And there are lanyards that are being made for them. So we're going to ask that every student has this. We're going to have a lot of these. And we realize that, although hand washing and the process of hand washing has been proven to be the most effective, this has also been proven to be effective. And that's something that we will be having our students do coming into classes regularly during the day, sanitizing hands, coming off of the playground, certainly, coming off of gym, certainly, after eating and before eating, certainly, it'll be a regular process for our students. To wash hands or to sanitize hands. Yes,
and Dr. Sullivan will be having schedules for the day custodian to go in between each of the lunches. He's going to be sanitizing the cafeteria at that point, and then outside at recess, the touch points for the playground.
Yep.
So he is going to have his roller skates on and cleaning everything he possibly can.
And we're also in talks to bring on touch point cleaners for every school, and that's all they do. Not that that's all they do, it's a very important function, but that's their main role, is to clean everything, to clean the railings, to clean the doorknobs, to clean those high touch point areas constantly throughout the day. So that is another mitigating factor. That's something we're looking at as well. Let's see. Kindergarten enrollment is low enough. Would it be taken into consideration to allow kindergartens to go full-time or at least 4 days a week instead of a hybrid model? I don't know. Nothing is out of the possibility. I'm just trying to wrap my head around that. Right now, our enrollment is actually really climbed.
Yeah, it did.
So I say that not surprisingly. Our kindergarten teachers are amazing. It's a great place to be, but it is it's right now it's climbed higher than we had even anticipated for a year that was a non-pandemic year.
Right.
So unless there's a major shift in that, I don't know that we'll be in that position at all. Would you say?
Well, our numbers are in kindergarten. Our numbers are pretty much the same that they are in the other grade levels. So there wouldn't be a difference between the grade levels and the numbers. Right now, they're the same, or they're in K1 or 2.
Take one more question, then I'll go into a speed round. I don't know why I created a speed round. I did that in the last one. It worked out pretty well. Will parents be given sufficient notice of obtaining any needed supplies, buying the appropriate supplies for remote art or science projects? You sure will. And we're looking at trying to provide them as much as we can. We're mindful of the need to manage materials so that, and Principal Farrell talked about those packets, manage the materials so we're not using a tremendous amount of paper, and we are at sort of a one-time usage. So yeah, you will get that, and that's an excellent question.
Dr. Sullivan, one of the things that we've been talking about is, especially at the lower grades, they touch everything. My crayons or your crayons are Dr. Scollin's crayons. So what we've been looking at is having something similar to each child will have their own plastic case with all the materials inside. It stays in school, stays at their desk, that's theirs. And the items that will be needed to go in there, definitely will be communicating with the parents. Staple runs will probably be very important, running the Staples and Target, but all the things that they need should be in one spot, that's theirs, that's our goal.
What is the difference between full remote and full remote within the hybrid? Good question. Remember, full remote within the hybrid has students coming in 2 days a week for in-person learning, and that right there is the major difference. Full remote only, students will not come in, as that is your choice. And that really needs to consider that from a model perspective. It's a little different than if you're in and out. From a planning perspective, as a teacher, you're planning one big lesson, but you do have students, and if you think of, if anyone knows about flipped learning, the idea is that you're doing more of the dynamic in-person stuff when you have them in person, and you're planning for more of a supplemental or independent situation when they're on their own, or not on their own, but when they're in the remote in the hybrid. Whereas a full remote might be a different module altogether because you're planning for a student just staying in that one model. Will the desk of students in grades 1 and below be 6 feet apart? 6 feet when possible, 3 feet at all times. You specifically mentioned fitting 12 desks in the secondary school. How many desks can you fit in Osgood rooms that are larger? What is the number that could potentially allow for students to be in class every day? And could you use the other spaces in Osgood, such as the library, music room, etc., to follow for increased spacing? We just didn't feel we could do it safely. And we felt like it was really tough with our class numbers to get the students in there at appropriate spacing. And then of course, transportation was our other major foe in that regard. Anything you want to add to that, Lisa?
Setting up the classrooms, the 6 feet apart is where we are going. Please also keep in mind that our students are little, so it looks different in our classroom, the desks being set up, but we also need to keep in mind that they like to move around quite a bit, and that's not necessarily what's going to facilitate the best learning. So we're giving them the space. And yes, the Osgood does have big, beautiful classrooms, but the setup of the room, sometimes we forget that the coat closet takes up so much space, the sink area. So it looks big, dimensional, but when you get in the actual room, it cuts down quite a bit.
Yeah, and all of the things, you put more kids in rooms and it causes more space issues and more possibility for kids to be closer together. And safety is really important. And safe doesn't necessarily mean, first of all, we couldn't fit them, but even if we could fit them exactly to the T, it doesn't necessarily mean it's safe from a social distancing perspective either. IEP services for pre-K, I guess this is supposed to be a speed round, but these are really deep questions, so I can't do that. So I'll take a couple more questions. IEP services for pre-K, they're good questions, by the way. I want to make sure you understand that. For pre-K, will these be done both remote? This is IEP services. Will these be done both remote and in class or just in class? Will lunch bunch be offered as it is part of my child's IEP? Barbara.
So, we're going forward with, our hybrid model as we are. As Principal Farrell said earlier, we're meeting with our pre-K teacher tomorrow, and we're going to hammer out exactly what, all of this is going to be able to look like. Everything we're going to have to do it safely. So to do a lunch bunch with kids, we're really going to have to take a really hard look at, what those IEPs say and what that could possibly look like before we can, really commit to anything. We know all of the reasons why those things take place for your kids and why they're in IEPs. Some things, and we will do that certainly with prior consultation with you, prior notification of you. Some things may need to happen per the IEP, but in a little bit different way than you're used to it happening, but still get the service in.
Thank you, Barbara. Now, this will be kind of a speed round now. We'll go really quickly. Not a question, just want to say thank you for having your teachers focus on cultural diversity and anti-racism. Our pleasure and our passion, something that we really want to do. Will teachers be regularly tested for COVID-19? Well, we're going to work that through. That's one of the negotiating things or the bargaining things we'd have to talk about. I can't really comment on that right now. What is the protocol for communication following a student or teacher testing positive showing symptoms? So that is all in the document. In terms of our protocols for everything, you can see it's right there. It was if you click on the attachment, you can see it under protocols for responding to COVID-19. And so there's some there's some important factors. I'm just looking at it to my left here that are common in all of these cases where there's something that could potentially be COVID. We're going to evaluate the symptoms, separate the kid from the others, the student from the others. Remember that we have students that might be coming down to the health clinic for a scraped knee, and we have someone that might be exhibiting a COVID symptom. We need to keep them very separated. When that does happen, if a student has a symptom, we will be trying to have a littler kid, a pre-K through K1. That would be a time when we would have the student attempt to wear a mask. That would be something that would be important. We want to separate them from others, clean and disinfect the spaces visited by the person, and then have there be testing for COVID-19 at home. You need to see your health professional do that. And then there's some protocols for if the tests are positive. There's protocols for really everything that we're going to follow. And in terms of communication, we're going to be really leaning on our public health agents to help guide us on when it's appropriate and when it isn't appropriate to communicate. We clearly want to be as transparent as we can and need to for health safety, but we also have to follow HIPAA and all the rules that are associated with that. So we will lean on our health officials, our district physician, Dr. Golden, who I'm hoping, and we're trying to plan a Zoom for Dr. Golden with all families, so you can get some question and answer with him regarding some of these concerns. That's hopefully happening in the next few weeks. Look for information on that. And then of course we have our social emotional component that's happening too. What day is that, Barbara, just so I can remember, and Leslie? Did I put you on the spot?
August 21st.
Excellent. I know you all have that info. Moving quicker. This one a little deeper here. This is about the amount of Zoom meetings we'll have. We're going to be mindful, although we're going to try to have a more robust day. We're also mindful that you can do Zoom overload for sure, and you can Zoom overload for the younger kids probably quicker. So we're going to be really mindful of that. Are there going to be penalties for family students who cannot partake in remote learning? No. Well, first of all, if you can't partake in remote learning, you should be communicating to us and talking to us about that. If it's a connectivity or device issue, we'll help you. And then secondly, I'd just like to know a little bit more about that before I'd answer that question. So if whoever wrote that wants to email me and ask me more specifics about that, I'll be happy to help. All right, now we are in the last three. Can you explain why the remote days are not tied in directly to the in-class instruction that day, where the remote students are watching the in-class instruction like the middle high school model? Well, I think, I don't want to speak, I'll let Lisa, if you want to get more specific, but I think it has a lot to do with the one-on-one thought of the basic skill development of the kid and making sure we pay specific attention to that. Is that probably the reason more than not, Lisa?
Yes, actually, one of the things that I noticed when during the May time period, I did a principal's book club with second grade students, and remember second grade are our oldest students in the building, and it's very difficult to have a large group and maintain their attention at the same time as delivering instruction. So if you had a live stream going on at home, the students in our school, the younger students, it's difficult for them to sit and focus on what's going on. Whereas at the high school you have, or even middle school, you have a specific teacher that you're listening to and interacting that way there. It's very different with the younger students.
Good. All right, this will be the last couple. I went longer, but we went a little longer in our explanation, so just even it out. For pre-K, it says Wednesday will be remote learning for all students. Does that mean we are going from a 4-day program to a 5-day program for pre-K? Well, do you want to answer that, Lisa?
I was, as I said, we talking with Barbara and our preschool teacher. It'll be a 4-day program. We have to tweak it a little bit to see what days we're looking at, how many days the pre-K is coming in, but it will be a 4-day program, not a 5-day program.
So that will be a bit of an adjustment from, I think, the draft I put in. And like I said, there's drafts for a reason, is that we're trying to tweak things. So you'll hear more about that coming forward. Last question, for fully remote students, do they get instruction? Absolutely. You can expect that you're going to get solid instruction. I think we're just starting to repeat things. A lot of thank yous. Any after school programming and before school programming, and I'll end with that. Dr. Scollins, you want to try that one?
I can. Hopefully I won't freeze again.
Welcome back. You froze it. I sat there for like 15 minutes. Like, I think maybe she's, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
We had already determined that we were going to work with the recreation department to provide a before and after school program for the elementary students, and actually a before school program for middle and high school. So we will continue to move forward with that. We were just waiting to finalize what it would look like for our schools and what we were doing, whether hybrid or remote. So we'll be moving that forward, and it will be in the morning before school starts, depending on the number of students we have. And then we'll hopefully be able to offer the afternoon program, and similar to what was probably happening before, but again, following all the guidelines and looking at how many students that we can accommodate.
The last couple thoughts is, obviously I mentioned that in the draft that we'll be using the access road from Old Pasture for people to go into to drop off from behind, and that will alleviate some of the pressure from more drop-offs happening because of our lack of bus space. More on that as we go, and it will be right now from Old Pasture into the back and then out onto Sawyer. And then kindergarten screening, question about that. You want to talk about where we are with that, Lisa, and we'll end with that.
Okay, thank you. The kindergarten screening, we're looking at doing that before the students get back in school. Once we have a date, we'll know a little bit more. So when the teachers are doing some of their professional development, they're required the beginning part of September to come in. We'll be reaching out to parents. You'll have more than enough time to hopefully schedule something, but the screening will be outside in a canopy area with the teacher that your child is going to have. This will be their first interaction with their classroom teacher, and you will also get to meet the teacher. Another case where we'll have the teacher standing from a distance or a picture of themselves without the mask and then the mask on. But we're really hoping that the screening itself gives everyone a little bit more of comfort level when it comes to meeting the teacher for the very first time.
Great. Okay, so we're going to conclude with that. We did go a little longer, but we felt we needed to answer those questions. So thank you. I did. I thank you for the panel. I'm sure you, if you didn't, you were here. So thank you. I'm sure you did. And all we can say is that we're all in this together. We really want to help your student come in, your children, and feel warm and welcomed and safe and happy, and we want to keep our level of learning as high as we ever had, and we're going to work with you hand in hand to do that. So thank you very much for your consideration, your help, and for being part of this process, and more to come. Remember, the school committee meeting on Friday will provide you more information. On Wednesday, not on Friday. You won't get anything on Friday. We'll provide more information. Thank you all. Thank you, panelists, and good night.
Good night. Thank you.